Hi guys, welcome back. My name's Craig from iProgress and I'm here today to give you 5 tips on things that you need to include in your research proposal when you're applying for a PhD or a doctoral place at a university. Now the first thing to think about is that your research proposal is your advert almost. It's you telling the university what it is that you want to offer them and why they should fund you. So you're thinking about persuading them maybe to give you some funding or to offer you a place on their program. Now, most universities will ask you to complete a research proposal, and what you do in this is think about what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, and how you're going to make sure that you can achieve that within a given time frame. Now, we've got 5 things that you need to include in your PhD proposals to make sure that they are as good as they can be and as persuasive as possible for potential universities. The first thing is that you need to develop and demonstrate your knowledge of your chosen area. Now, this means highlighting key theories, highlighting key academics or scholars in your area, and making sure that you are showing the academic skills that are necessary to do a PhD. So can you build an argument? Can you synthesize information well? Can you reference effectively? Can you show that you are an effective scholar even before you start doing your PhD? Now, hopefully what you will have done when you've reviewed the literature is to think about where the potential gaps are in that literature or evidence base, or how you can expand the literature that is already there. Now, when you're thinking about developing a research question, which is the next key thing that you would need to put into your research proposal, most people get you to think about a gap that you're trying to fill. Now, this is one way of developing a research question. Another way is to think about expanding a body of knowledge. Now, what we are seeing, particularly in the social sciences and particularly in psychology, is that a lot of research now is not replicable. It doesn't replicate when people try to do the same things in different contexts or with different samples. Now, this is a big problem because it means that we can't really trust a lot of findings that are coming out from the social sciences at the moment. Now, what the core of this is potentially is that people are just establishing gaps or seeing where a particular phenomenon hasn't been tested and saying, well, there's a gap, I'll just do the same thing there. If you haven't got a theoretical justification for filling that gap, then that's a real limitation for your research proposal. So don't feel as though you need to completely reinvent the wheel. Don't feel like you need to identify a completely new area of research. If you can build on an existing theory, if you can apply an existing theory in a new context where it makes sense to do that, then that's what you should be doing. So think about what your research question is. Are you establishing a research question that is theoretically driven? Is it designed to test a particular theory? Or is it problem focused? Is it designed to solve a particular social problem or to address something that's going on in the world at the moment? Once you've stated that research question, you should then go on to tell your university, the people who are going to be looking at your proposal, how you would answer that question. So this is where you'll consider your methods. In this section of your report, what you should be doing is thinking about different ways of answering your research question. There will never be just one way that you can test a research question, and what you should be doing is to identify what the potential different avenues are for you so that you can show that you have justified the response that you are going to take. This justification is really important because what it does is it shows the university and shows the potential supervisor that you have the ability to consider different perspectives, different methods, different approaches, compare them, contrast them, think about the strengths and limitations of either option, and also think through, for you, what makes the most sense. And when you think about if you are successful with your PhD, you'll go through a viva process at the end of that process of doing the doctoral study, which is essentially an oral examination where you'll have an examiner asking you essentially to justify the decisions that you've made throughout that process. If you can start building in those justifications right from the beginning, then that'll stand you in really good stead throughout the entirety of that PhD process. Now, the important thing to really consider here is that your methods should be tied to your research question. You should be asking a question that will allow you to produce an answer, but that answer should be producible using the methods that you're proposing. Now, if you can do that, if you can show that there is a tangible link between the methods that you're choosing and the research question, then again, what you're showing is really good research skills in terms of how you can design a complete program of study. In terms of the methods, also highlight what is feasible and what isn't feasible. Now, this is really important, again, because you're showing that you have an awareness of the limitations of various different methods. So you know what methods can achieve and what they can't. So it's about producing that realistic view of what you're going to be doing, why you're going to be doing it, and also how you're going to be doing that over the course of your PhD process. Now, a PhD is a collection of studies. Usually what people will have are maybe 3, 4 or 5 studies within their PhD project. And it's really important that throughout your proposal you're showing how each of the studies links to the others. Now, a PhD thesis, the document that you'll complete at the end or submit for examination, should read almost like a story. Now, that can be a story of discovery in terms of the discovery of knowledge, or it can be a story of your specific process of development as an early career academic. And obviously you're not necessarily going to know exactly what that story looks like when you're writing your proposal, but what you can do is show how the studies that you're proposing all link together to give you an overview of your topic of study. What this will do is show your supervisor, your potential supervisor, your university that you're applying to, that you can think through what a project looks like rather than just planning individual standalone studies, and this will really show how you're going to be able to make a contribution to the field of work that you're trying to move into. Now, thinking about the program of study in its entirety, you'll also need to produce a timings plan. So what are you going to do when, and how are you going to make sure that this gets done? And what most people do is to produce a Gantt chart. This is a table that you can make where you put each year that you'll be studying as a row and each month of those years in columns. And what you do is you shade in each cell of that table based on what you're going to be doing at each point of the process of doing a PhD. Now, this is a really common way of mapping out the development of a project, but what your timings process should be looking like is much more complex than this, much more in-depth than this. You should be thinking about the potential hurdles that you might encounter during the PhD process. What are you going to do to overcome some of those? Think about the challenges that you might face during the PhD process, but also think about contingency plans. What are you going to do if things don't quite go to plan? How are you going to overcome some of those so that the people that you're applying to have the confidence that you'll be able to complete on time and within a particular budget? This is particularly important when you have registration limits in place. So in the UK, for example, it might be that you only have 4 years to produce your PhD thesis if you're working full time. It might be that you only have funding for 3 of those years. So if you're really interested in getting funding and making sure that you finish within that funding period, having a realistic time frame and having contingency plans to make sure you can work within that will be really important for you. Now, on the topic of funding, if you are applying for studentships or contracts or scholarships, then it'll be really important that you sell yourself as well. In a lot of these cases, the project will obviously be important, but ultimately the university is funding you as a potential researcher. So showcase the skills that you have, the academic knowledge that you have, and really make sure that the experiences that you've developed throughout your undergraduate and your postgraduate studies really come to the fore. If you've achieved really highly in terms of your previous studies, make sure you really sell that. It's quite difficult to do that sometimes, but make sure that the university knows who they are going to be investing in. And if you do that, what you'll be able to do is to hopefully show that you are the type of person that they want to fund, but equally you have the project that will be really important and really impactful for their particular department. Okay, so they are our 5 things that you would include in your proposal. That's demonstrating knowledge, stating your question, developing methods that will allow you to answer that question, sketching out your project's story, and also developing a realistic timeline for that PhD proposal. Also adding in stuff around yourself and why you are a particularly good candidate will stand you in good stead. Hopefully this has been useful for you. If it has, please drop the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and in the comments let us know how you've got on with your PhD application.